I was accompanied by applause. Someone even brought a chocolate cake with the inscription, "Thank you for your legacy." Officially, I was retiring. Not suddenly, not scandalously. No cardboard boxes and bitter posts on LinkedIn. It was simply time to rest, as Seth, our new COO, said, shaking my hand with care, as if I were a museum piece still breathing. And I stood there, smiling, holding a glass of cheap plastic champagne, and thinking about the condensation on the pipes in Shop 4, because it appeared there a week ago. And when condensation appears, fungus appears. And when the fungus appears, the health department is just around the corner. I knew that. They didn't. I wasn't always like this. I used to write motivational speeches for farewells too. I also used to believe in honorable retirement. But when you're 63 and you've invested more in this company than in your own kitchen, something breaks when they smile at you while taking your badge away. My name is Ivy Marlowe. 30 years ago, I came here because I was told, "We are going bankrupt. We need a woman who is not afraid of difficulties." I was not afraid. Even when we were looking for a way to wash the equipment with citric acid because we had no money for disinfection. Even when I personally delivered the batches because the drivers were on strike. Even when we stayed late into the night because the refrigerators could not withstand the overload. And what did I get? A welcome breakfast schedule for the department, which I created from scratch, and a case with gifts, a bottle of wine and a notebook with the company logo. I would have laughed if I didn't know how many employees received a gift in the form of an unexplained respiratory disease in the same shop, with the same fungus, which is now being masked by ventilation that no one has checked. I was silent, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was learning to listen. When you are forced into honorable retirement, the first thing you feel is shame. The second is anger, and the third is calculation. I had noticed that instead of regularly cleaning the air filters, Seth had ordered cheaper chemical neutralization, and I knew exactly which of the suppliers had fake certificates. Because these people had sold us gaskets for packaging back in 2008, and I personally got them replaced, and now they are back. I did not stop the going-away party. Why? When everyone was raising their glasses, I kept in mind a series of documents that had not yet been destroyed, and most importantly, who had the keys to the server room. Because I knew that electronic copies of the reports remained even after the database was cleared. This was not a pension. It was a transfer to the shadows. Seth Broadman appeared in the office the same way a fungus appears after a flood, quickly, without warning, and for some reason with the Harvard Business School logo on his resume. He was young, clean-shaven, wearing shoes that were too shiny for the warehouse and too expensive to actually wear. His first email began with the words, "Let's reimagine productivity." I wanted to respond, "Let's start with hand washing." He removed our manual sorting because it was too human, he said. He introduced digital tablets that froze at the first contact with dust. He installed porta potties for visitors because appearance is important, taking money from the ventilation shaft maintenance fund. I watched in silence, because I've seen them before. In his second week on the job, Seth called me into his office. "Ivy, I've been studying your reporting structure," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "It's, interesting, but a little outdated." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the kind that works?" He smiled, not stopping typing. "I think we could automate some of the procedures. You don't mind change, do you?" "Changes, no," I said. "Doubtful efficiency, yes." He smiled again. That smile that men in the sand age use when they want to be polite but don't listen. I left his office knowing only one thing. I had been written off, not for my results, not because of my age, but because I reminded them that things used to be different here. And different is a scary word for those who are afraid of comparisons. That same week, I saw my weekly filtering status reports disappear. They were being integrated into a new platform that I had no access to. And then Seth reassigned my junior engineer, Paul, to an external audit project. Paul, who was still confusing minimum acceptable ammonia levels with moisture levels. Paul, who once asked if the word hazardous could be removed from the labeling on solvent boxes because it scares new employees. At the weekly meeting, Seth announced, We are optimizing the logistics line and implementing a cross-functional modular system. I watched as my colleagues nodded as if they understood. And I took notes, not words, reactions. He thought I was just a pensioner, and I was already counting how long it would be before someone fell in the wet corridor of the fourth workshop because of the condensation that had not yet been removed. I have always believed that silence is not a surrender. It is a method. It was valued at our plant, especially when something broke down. Not to panic, no screaming, just get up, see what happened, and start recording it. Because it's not noise that cures breakdowns. It's attention. I was silent when my reports disappeared. I was silent when a technician with 20 years of experience was replaced by the nephew of a new contractor with a QR code tattooed on his neck. But I didn't stop listening. The third building began to smell like it did in 2006, when we did not have our own filtration system. Back then, it was an experimental building, and now the main production line is operating there. Back then, I watched the workers develop wheezing, one by one, not immediately, but noticeably. I knew these symptoms, and they were coming back. I went there as if by accident. I still had my badge, which opens almost all doors, an old privilege that the new IT people hadn't noticed. There, near the ventilation grill, I saw droplets, small, heavy, with a metallic smell, and a film. The condensation was mixed with dust, creating an ideal environment for bacteria. "Everything's fine here, Mrs. Marlowe," the technician told me, not recognizing me. "New filters, by the way." "I know," I said. "Aerotech." He glanced at me. "Yes, they're everywhere now. They save 20% on energy costs." I didn't say anything. I knew how much they save on health. That evening, I wrote it down. Workshop 3, humidity is 82%, condensation near the ceiling, temperature drop, filters are new, no plasma purifier, repeat of 2006 risk. See prevention log for 2020. And below, don't ask, not yet, watch. I started coming early, very early, even before the guards. My badge worked only until 7:45. After that, it was limited. I used this period as an admission to the field. I had time to check the server room, the logistics room, and, most importantly, the storeroom with the documentation. There were old reports there, mine, signed by me, but some were now rewritten, with the same title, the same format, but with different numbers, and with a new signature, also mine. "You don't mind if I optimize the template, do you?" Seth once asked. I thought he was talking about the font. I was torn by a double reaction, anger and calm, because anger is a reaction, and calmness is a position. I couldn't prove anything with words, but I could create a story. And this story already had a chronology, evidence, and most importantly, repeatability. And thus, a pattern. A signature is not just a name. It is my pulse in ink. And when I saw the report with my name and date 2 weeks ago, when I was physically at home, with a thermometer under my arm and elderberry tea, I understood. Seth had crossed the line. While I was recording humidity and filters, he was recording something else. My silence. The report was about a ventilation audit. It was written clearly, like a template. The phrases were familiar, the structure was mine, but there were no nuances. The very little things that I had never ignored. No filter series, no temperature plume, no type of dustiness. And most importantly, there was no summary. I always wrote a conclusion. And here it was, just, complies with the internal protocol. Well, he must have a new protocol now. I took the folder. I clutched it to my chest as if it weighed not 300 grams, but 30 years of my life. And I walked out. Without running away. Not nervously. I just went to the archive. There was an old lady in the archive named Mabel. She was at the plant before I was. She believed that the best thing to archive is not a document, but a person, especially when no one can hear them. "Mabel, have you seen this report before?" She took the file. She looked at the signature, at me, and she said very simply, "The signature is yours, but the heart is not yours." It was better than an examination. I started digging. Old versions, new versions, comparisons. After 2 hours with a ruler, a magnifying glass, and 3 cups of coffee, I had 5 reports that I hadn't written. And 3 more, in which my phrases were rearranged like children's cubes. He was learning to write like me, but he had not yet learned to think like me. That evening, I took out an old printer, the one that my husband had repaired when we wrote a complaint to the environmental inspection in 1999. He said then, "If they know your handwriting, then learn to type so that they don't recognize you, but so that they can't refute it." I did, and I kept it, and categorized them: genuine, doubtful, fake. It would seem like schizophrenia, but in the corporate world, it's just good source management. The next day, I came to see Seth, without warning, into his transparent office, where he had an iPad on the desk, where he was probably asking his team to scan my old reports. "Mrs. Marlowe," his voice stretched like bubblegum, "it's good to see you. How are you adjusting to your new schedule?" "It's great," I sat down across from him, "especially when I have time to reread what I supposedly wrote." He squinted. That was too fast, like someone unused to resistance. "You mean—" I pulled out the sheets. I put them in front of him like cards. Not trump cards. Testimony. "Seth, you can't sign with my hands. Otherwise, I'll start using my voice." He put his foot up. The smile didn't disappear, but his breathing changed. "These are just templates. For convenience. Your style was effective. We wanted to maintain continuity." Continuity is when you carry on the work, not steal the authorship. I'm up. One more thing. You have reduced the number of ventilation checks from monthly to quarterly. This is not continuity. This is negligence. He didn't say anything. He didn't deny it. But his eyes were already calling for a lawyer. Good. Then we are ready. I have never believed in retirement time. It's not a date. It's a choice. It's like letting go of the wheel. And I'm not ready yet. That evening, I pulled an old knitted blanket out of the box, the one my husband and I had made in the first year of our marriage. I covered myself with it, took a notebook, and wrote at the top of the page, "Official reaction, not an emotion. Action." The list was short. 1. Print all conflicting reports. 2. Check the Aerotech filter series. 3. Contact the municipal inspector. 4. Prepare a dossier. 5. Submit it. No warning. I remembered what my husband, Ben, used to teach me. Documents are bullets, Ivy, but you have to shoot when you have a target and an escape plan. He was gone, but the plan remained. I pulled out an old chest. It was in the pantry next to boxes of postcards, a heater that always broke down, and an album of photos I hadn't been able to look at yet. The chest contained everything we had ever collected: protocols, certificates, recordings of conversations, technical essays, even ventilation schemes from 1997. Back then, we were fighting with the city inspection for the safety of the old building. I pulled out one of the letters, Ben's appeal to the Labor Protection Department. The style is dry but precise, and at the very end, "We are not asking, we are informing, and we are ready to respond." I dialed Harvey Slater's number. He is now the head of the technical department of the municipality. He's 43, and we met when he was a rookie inspector. Back then, he was scared when my husband and I came to him with 28 signatures and photos showing the ventilation system covered with mouse droppings. But he reacted. "Good for you." "Ivy, this is unexpected." His voice was cautious, but not hostile. "Hey, Harvey, remember the Aerotech filters? Don't tell me again?" "I am. And there's something else. I didn't speak for a long time, but I was clear. Names, dates, series, signatures. Send everything officially, anonymously if you want, but documented. I'm already preparing the parcel. It will contain Lot 5. An old friend, remember?" He laughed. "Back in 2001, we used to sign documents with wine-colored ink. We wrote Lot 5 in the corner of each letter. And to avoid confusion, we put a sprig of lavender in the envelope, for the scent of confidence. Now I bought lavender from my grandmother at the market. I wrapped it in a napkin. I put it with the papers. The box looked ordinary from the outside, but inside was a story. Every page was proof that I wasn't just watching. I was preparing. I had no seal, but I had a memory. I was not in office, but I was in the middle of the process. And most importantly, I knew how to document not a crime, but a systemic lie. And this is more dangerous. The post office was empty. The girl behind the counter smiled. Something urgent? I nodded. Yes, for the city. From a veteran. An unscheduled inspection is not an alarm, it is a symphony. The silence before the first notes is the loudest. And I heard it. It was 9:04 when a silver minibus with the emblem of the city inspection pulled up to the gate. Harvey, of course, was the last to get out. On purpose. He looked like a conductor. His coat was on, unbuttoned, a notebook in his hands. He was not playing, he was conducting. Seth came out of the administrative entrance with that fake smile he always wore when visiting investors. His shoulders were tense, but his chin was stubbornly held up. "Good morning," he said in the voice of a PowerPoint presentation. Harvey did not smile. An anonymous request. A study of the condition of ventilation systems and compliance with air exchange standards. We've digitized everything. Seth gestured to the iPad sticking out of the back pocket of his briefcase. I can send you a PDF. We'll review it in person, on the spot. This moment when a leader loses his or her digital shield is always worthy of attention. I stood a little to the side with a cup of coffee in both hands. Not because it was cold, but just to avoid touching anything unnecessary, so that no one would say, she pressed it or she opened it. The inspectors entered building nowhere 2, the same one where a microscopic fungus had settled under the ceiling, which no one wanted to name out loud, where the humidity was at 78%. I knew this. Seth probably knew it too, but he liked graphs more than smells. I followed them, not in the group, but a little behind, and I saw how my observation diary was becoming a route for their inspection. Ellie, a technician from the junior shift, walked by. She usually avoided me, but now she looked directly at me. "Did you know they were coming?" she asked in a whisper. "I knew something had to change," I answered. She nodded and took a step closer. I saw the filters. The new ones were worse, but we were told that they were approved by the management. "Did you write that down?" "I'm afraid, but I can. Not all heroes wear hoods. Some of them just wear lab coats." At lunch, Seth looked pale. He pretended to be working on his laptop, but his fingers were too tense. They weren't typing. They were holding onto the table. His digital reality had malfunctioned, and when the timeline cracks, only the truth remains. At 2:37 p.m., Harvey came to me. "You knew it would come to this, right?" I just wanted to make sure no one suffocated. He silently handed me the file. "You are no longer on the staff, but your name is in every report we review. I was here for 30 years. My name and the ventilation here have become one." He smiled. "There will be an invitation for a conversation, but it will not be an inspection. It will be a recording of testimony." I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I felt that the pressure in my lungs was not from moisture. In the evening, I was alone in the corridor. There were purple stains on the ceiling. Below, there are traces of rubber boots of the inspectors, and the flavor of lavender on the tip of my tongue. I was summoned for clarification. But I knew that this was not a clarification. It was a position. The hearing room of the city department smelled of old wood and toner dust. Time passed more slowly here than in the real world. It was a place where words had weight, not because of their loudness, but because of their archival nature. I walked in at exactly 10 o'clock. Harvey was already waiting. He didn't say hello, didn't get up. He just pressed the button on the recorder. "Please state your full name." "Marlowe Ivy Louise, 63 years old, former head of the Environmental Protection Department at MainFlow Industrial. You have sent us 46 pages of documents, 19 photos, 6 audio files, and a list of 14 names. Do you realize that this is the basis for an investigation?" "Yes." He paused. "And you deliberately did not make copies of some of the data?" "Only those with blood on them. We have no evidence of injuries. Because I didn't write the reports. I didn't speak loudly. I just stopped bending, and it seemed to be louder than a scream." "Did you come here to prove Seth Broadman's guilt?" Harvey asked. "No." "Then what do you want?" And then I finally felt that I had a voice. Not as an opinion, but as a sound. I want someone to ask the question that no one has had time to ask for the last 2 years. Why did we stop breathing normally? I pulled out a printout from my bag, not an official one. Just a copy of a magazine from 1999. There, in a notebook with yellowed edges, was my first remark about microdust after the reconstruction of the second workshop. This is what I wrote 25 years ago, and this is a copy of the digital report from last week. They are the same, only the signatures are different. But the fungus is the same, and the supplier is the same. Harvey leaned in, for the first time in the entire meeting. You don't want a personal vendetta? No. But you want consequences? Yes, not for him, for the system. He turned off the recorder. Ivy, are you prepared for this to go public? Isn't it already public? My lungs are also a public space. I talked for another 40 minutes after that. Not about Seth, about logic, about the feeling of breathing walls, about young workers who never felt they had the right to say, something is wrong. And when I left, I knew that my name was no longer just in the reports. It is now in memory. I was not supposed to be there. The invitation to the conference that came in the mail, I first put it in a drawer with old letters and iron warranties. It was an anniversary event. 20 years of the municipal program Clean Air. I was once among the first to develop it. Back then, we went around the workshops with moisture meters and plastic tubes, measuring dust levels manually. Today, it's all automated. Digital sensors, drones, programs. And the main sponsor of the event is our plant, or rather, their plant now. Seth Broadman, COO of the Year, a young star of industrial transformation. What an ironic invitation to take part in the celebration of a system that was itself disrupted. But I accepted. Officially, as an honorary participant of the first year of the program. Informally, as a source of memories. But I knew that this time my memories would be very concrete. It was cool in the large hall of the town hall. White and blue banners read, "A new era of responsibility." Seth was sitting in the front row, shiny shoes on, with a new watch that he clicked on the table every 30 seconds. His presentation was typical. Graphs, QR codes, words like integration, innovation, and optimization. I was silently waiting for my time. When I was invited to the stage, I didn't open my laptop. I just held the flash drive in my hand. I am not a technologist, and not a lawyer, I said, but I have eyes, and a memory, and work boots that still have dirt on them from the third corridor, where the ventilation system has been feeding moist air back into the processing line since June. I plugged the flash drive into the organizer's computer. The screen shows a series of internal photos: fogged glass in the technical room, drops on the internal pipe, traces of mold under the regulators. This is not a montage. This was taken 2 weeks ago, and this is the place where the packaging for food components is stored. The next slide is the invoice. Aerotech Vent Service entered into the system as a priority contractor, although their license was revoked in 2021. When I asked about them, I was told that it was a temporary contract, but it has been in the system since April, without a tender, without approval, and then a report, under my signature. This document was submitted on my behalf, but I did not write it, and I did not sign it. This means that someone else did it deliberately. The report states, humidity is normal, ventilation check completed, quality control, approved by Marlowe. I clicked on it, and here is the laboratory report, the same week. The moisture level was exceeded by 3.4 times. Microspores are critical. Where is this norm? Harvey sat silently in the room, not taking his eyes off me. I showed him another file, a sick note, a technician, 29 years old, acute allergic reaction, not a single mention in the system, just silence. Again, the signature, checked. And the last frame is a screenshot from the internal chat. I remind you that all data must be approved through the coordinator. The priority is to maintain corporate trust. I stopped. I looked out into the hall. No one was moving. So the question is not whether we control everything. The question is whether we are controlled by fear. Fear of losing our position, reputation, silence. It is this fear that makes people sign something they have not seen, to clean up what has not been fixed, and to be silent when everything is screaming. I put the flash drive away, and returned to my seat. Seth left the room 40 seconds later. No one applauded, but the silence was louder than any applause. The morning after the conference, I woke up not to an alarm clock, but to a shower of emails. One of them I had been waiting for, from Harvey.Schultz@Stadtaufsicht.de subject. Meeting. Ivy, the official investigation has been launched. Thank you for your clarity, restraint, and timing. We will need your written testimony and copies of all materials. P.S. It seems you have allies. They will come to you. Other letters are from journalists. One of the least aggressive headlines in the news was, Westro Scandal. Senior engineer exposes poisoned ventilation and falsified documents. Local television showed an excerpt from my speech. Not the whole speech, but the moment when I said, the question is not about the numbers. The question is why we allow cowards to lead the processes on which people's health depends. I don't like to look at myself from the outside, but that day I made an exception, not because of myself, but because of Seth, because his face was shown in full view in the hall, and even his exit was recorded. Mabel called first. You know, I thought you were going to give up, but you went ahead and pressed the whole system so hard that it was wheezing. Proud is an understatement. And then there was Ellie. I told my colleagues that I would not be silent anymore. We started checking old reports. There are a lot of things that don't add up. If you allow me, I've collected copies. Maybe they will be useful? I answered one thing. Everything will work now. By the evening, I had already received 5 calls from law firms. One man from New York offered to handle the case on a full representation basis, no upfront fees. I refused. This is not a court show. This is a cleansing. No fees, no cameras, no sensationalism. Harvey called me personally. Do you know what they're doing now? They're issuing an internal circular saying, temporary suspension of contracts with outside contractors pending the outcome of the audit. This is panic, Ivy, and it's your fault. That's not my goal, I replied. The goal is to make sure that you can go in there again without an inhaler. Meanwhile, the company's shares fell by 7%. The press was clamoring for comment. The communications director issued a cold statement. We are grateful to Miss Marlowe for her many years of service. We have launched an internal review and are committed to transparency. No, we're sorry. No, we were wrong. But even this was enough to silence Seth's phone. He no longer responded to journalists or colleagues. There were rumors that he had left for an urgent business trip. And in the comments under the video conference, phrases appeared. I worked there, and it's true. Thank you for finally speaking up. She said what we were afraid to even think. This is not just a woman from the archive. This is an archive of dignity itself. I didn't answer. Because this is not about cursing or gratitude. It's about regaining control over the truth. The invitation came unexpectedly on official letterhead with the seal of the municipality. The subject, Proposal for Cooperation, a strategy for environmental modernization of the city. I read the letter several times. The wording was careful, diplomatic, but the essence was simple. We have seen how you are holding up. We heard your voice. We want to work together. I was invited to head an advisory group to reform the inspection transparency system, not as a controller, but as someone who knows how it should be, because I have done it before, at a level that no audit can measure. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel any pressure, just simple, pure. You are being seen. I turned on the old alarm clock again for 5:40, not because I had an urgent shift, but because I finally wanted to get up in the morning. Take notes again. Keep a diary of observations, carrying a notebook in which I wrote down the names of those who wanted to build, not those who sabotaged. Ellie handed me a letter with the signatures of the young workers, a short, "Thank you for not being scared," and a sticker, "Clean, not just in the air." I kept it. I stuck it on the inside cover of my new work laptop. Mabel called that evening. "Well, Miss Manager?" she said, with a laugh that did not hide her pride. "Miss Consultant," I replied. "But the main thing is that it's now without obstacles. At my first meeting with the City Council, I didn't wear a new jacket, but the same one I wore for my first interview back in 1987. The fabric is a little faded, but the shoulders are still holding up. And so did I. I sat next to architects, biologists, and lawyers, young, dynamic, technologically advanced, and none of them looked down on me. One even asked me, "How did you learn to distinguish so clearly when a system is rotten?" I smiled. It's not a skill. It's a reaction when you've been changing filters yourself for 10 years in a row, and you've seen them not being changed. On the way out of the city hall, a woman stopped me. She was holding her daughter's hand, about 6 years old. "Are you Ivy?" she asked. I nodded. "Thank you. Your story gave me the courage to quit my job, where I had been silenced for years." I stooped to the level of a child who looked at me with an attentiveness that even adults rarely give. "If something seems wrong, don't be silent," I told her, "even if everyone around you is silent." The girl nodded. And for the first time in a long time, I did not go home. I went forward,